Welcome back, people. It's going to be a short intro because I'm going to introduce our guest when we start the interview. I'm obviously dressed up a little bit nicer today, and that's because today's topic is serious as hell. We're talking about TABOR, one of the most restrictive tax codes in the entire United States. It is responsible for Colorado being one of the wealthiest states in the union, however, having one of the most poorly funded governments, having some of the most poorly funded schools, and the reason why Colorado, at the end of this year, will be in a $2.5 billion deficit. So we're going to talk about the inefficiencies of TABOR, what it lacks in helping to calculate effective tax measures, changes that we can make to our system to make it more equitable to people and make sure that we can fund social programs that we need, things like education, Medicaid, food stamps, everything. So without further ado, we're going to jump into that interview. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like letting us know what's getting you down, or if you're feeling especially frustrated with Colorado's tax system by the end of this video, fill out that digital comment card in the description below, and we'll get you on board to start doing some tax work. Well, sweet. Okay. Folks, this will be the only time I'm going to address y'all carefully. The only fourth wall break throughout this whole video. Okay, I lied. Arrest me. It's not going to be the only fourth wall break I do during this interview. I'm going to pop in here big short style to just give quick breakdowns of what we're talking about. Because a lot of this stuff went over my head. And I had to go and do some research afterwards and beforehand to understand what Chris was talking about. Because this is a man who's dedicated his life to economics. And I myself have taken one micro-econ course. I got exciting news though. New Era just filed a brand spanking new ballot measure to tackle the very thing we are going to talk about today with Chris. Buckle up, folks, because things are going to get bananas. But we filed with the Protect Colorado's Future Coalition, and one of those coalition members is the Colorado Fiscal Institute. I do a lot of work with the Colorado Fiscal Institute. The lovely people there have come and given talks to our local chapters. They were a big support on the Boulder minimum wage campaign. If you need economic data, if you need an economic whiz, CFI is going to be your place to go. And they're here today. So Chris.
Whiz in the room.
In the room. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the people why the hell you agreed to do this and who you are.
Yeah, my name is Chris Stifler. I've been working for CFI for the past 13 years. I do a lot of presentations. I have a background in economics. I also teach economics. 13 years, basically, I made a career out of explaining TABOR, and I've made a career out of basically answering the same question over and over. How much tax revenue do we get from marijuana?
Nice. Well, sweet. Yeah, my knowledge about economics can really only take us so far, that being very little knowledge about economics. So I thought it'd be a good idea to bring you in to talk a little bit about an issue that New Era is going to be focused on over the next, hopefully just over the next year. Hopefully we don't have to extend it farther than that. But an issue that it is tough to rally young people around, but an issue that affects young people quite a bit. I myself, I just moved from Boulder to Denver because rental prices were too high. I was not eligible for assistance from the government. And, you know, even things as far as this YouTube channel, I only really started because of my position at New Era. You know, New Era is a place where they pay a living wage. We got a bonus. Last year was the first time in my life I got a bonus, so I purchased a gaming computer. And from that kind of spawned the idea of doing the YouTube channel.
Nice.
Most young people in Colorado are not in that position of having a job that pays a living wage, living a rent or a burden-free life as far as like rent and cost of living goes. But in the last year in Colorado, we've seen a couple things happen. One, cost of living prices has continued to skyrocket. And then one of the more interesting and maybe like sneakier, malevolent things that's been going on is at the legislative level with our budget, both state and local. So obviously there's some cuts coming from the federal side of things, but also Colorado reported, we just had a special session about this, but Colorado reported $2.5 billion or $2 billion deficit this year?
Yeah, it was weird. So, okay, let's rewind back.
Yeah.
So let's go back to November 1st. Governor puts out his budget, says it looks at the forecast as how much money we have for next year's budget, because they start budget writing in January. And it was bad news. It was like $650 million short of, so we need to make $650 million worth of cuts. Okay. And then in November last year, if you were a voter, there were like 14 different things on the bottom of the ballot. I made the joke out there about how the presidential debate, we're talking about eating cats and dogs. But in Colorado, we literally voted on cats and dogs.
Yeah.
We had that, like, the veterinarian thing, and then, like, the bobcat hunting. Yeah. One of the ones that did pass that influences the general fund, our state budget, was Prop 130.
Okay.
Remember that one?
Remind me.
That was the local law enforcement one. That's
right.
You got to find $350 million in state budget, give it to local law enforcement, sheriff's office, all right? But there was no funding mechanism for that. Voters just said, find $350 million in state budget, give it to locals. So then we basically had a $650 million shortfall, add $350, and legislators started in January $1 billion in the hole.
Woof. Okay. So
Yeah.
starting the year off not to a great start. We were already a little bit low on money. I know that there were rumors even in November of cutting social programs, and at the very same time, they were talking about giving an additional $650 million to law enforcement. $350 million to law enforcement. Okay, so not a good start.
So we bridged it with, we made some cuts to our transportation, we cut Medicaid, essentially. We kind of sneakily cut schools. We did a bunch of one-time things to really bridge this $1 billion shortfall. And then, federal budget, the HR 1, or the Big Beautiful Bill, if you're familiar with that, it was signed July 4th. Okay? What's unique in Colorado is we have a thing called rolling conformity, and we automatically start our taxes with federal taxable income. So crazy, boring, wonky. Basically means if the federal government changes their tax code, we automatically import those changes to our tax code. I've been telling people we're like a tax Roomba. If the federal government poops on the carpet, we just automatically suck it right up.
Nice. Okay.
So all those deductions, remember you're talking about like no taxes on tips, no tax on overtime, bunch of business deductions. Those are passed at the federal level, but they automatically impact how much taxable income we have in Colorado. So it's a weird interaction where federal government changes tax code, it shrinks our tax base, and then our income tax is applied to a lower tax base. That's all to explain we had another $1 billion worth of lost revenue because of HR 1.
Dang. Okay, so we started in a position where we were a couple $100 million short.
Yeah.
And then because of the federal changes, the group of people that we were able to take that money to just shrank.
It's not quite the group, it's more like, so like I teach people, AGI is your adjusted gross income. It's all the money you earn. And then when you do TurboTax, you deduct your deductions and your mortgage interest and what you donate to charity.
Yeah.
You whittle down AGI into smaller taxable. So someone who makes maybe $70,000 might have $40,000 in taxable.
Yeah, okay.
So that stuff in the middle of those deductions, that's what the federal government changed.
I see, okay.
So they basically increased the deductions, which means everyone gets to whittle down more of their AGI into smaller taxable.
Oh, so we just had less to pull from.
You know, our tax base shrunk, particularly for corporations. So we gave these big corporate deductions, which means they have less taxable income that we multiply by 4.4% to get our income tax.
Okay, time out. What the fuck is AGI? Basically, what Chris is saying here is that when a corporation or a person does their taxes, they start with their gross income. Then there's a list of deductions that comes from federal or state that then get taken out of their taxable income, the amount of money that can be taxed by the government. Under our new presidential administration, that list of deductions has grown substantially for people like corporations and the ultra wealthy, meaning that they have less taxable income for the government to tax after filing. What this results in is Colorado having a much smaller pool of taxable money to pull through. And that's what Chris is talking about here. When we'll talk about cuts to schools, Medicaid, teacher salaries, social programs, that all happens in part because this pool of deductible income shrinks.
And to bring it back to TABOR, TABOR says their government can only grow by inflation plus population growth. So basically we have this cap grows by inflation and population. Prices go up 2%, population goes up 2%, the cap can grow by 4%. And then all that we collect in taxes and fees has to stay below the cap. If we collect more taxes and fees than that cap allows, all that money gets returned to us in the form of TABOR rebates. And this is what people know about TABOR, is because we were so far above the cap in 2022 that we sent $750 checks to everybody.
I do remember how excited I was to receive
I bought a new pair of skis. Yeah, I was.
Yeah. You know, and I have seen, because we've been doing some social media engagement stuff on TABOR for the last couple of months, and there have been folks in the comments that have been really pressing about the TABOR refunds. There's usually 2 points that people bring up when someone is to criticize TABOR, because it is this big, heavy tax code that either people aren't aware of or they're aware of it enough to think that they enjoy it and they get a lot of benefit of it, or there's people like folks working at CFI who understand TABOR is a little bit at a detriment to the state of Colorado. But people bring up kind of 2 points when they're talking about criticisms of TABOR, and one is that TABOR refunds are great, like ensuring that taxpayers can get money that the government won't spend back into their pockets seems like a really lovely thing, and I really enjoyed my TABOR refund. The other thing is, why the hell is it a bad thing that our tax decisions are sent to the voters?
Yeah, there's a good ones. I mean, you hear that a lot as well. The TABOR, and it's $800 to a low-income family, to a medium-income family is a lot of money.
Yeah.
I think you have to judge the tax code based on, is it even efficient or enough to, okay, we have $800 checks, but we also have like the least competitive starting teacher salary in the country. I mean, we suck at per pupil funding. We're like the bottom 10th in states on higher education funding.
Mm-hmm.
We could get more money to our roads. We could strengthen our roads and bridges. We could improve our transit systems. We can't even do anything new. Basically, TABOR caps us on just bare. I say TABOR doesn't even let us to grow in real terms, because what government buys is not what inflation actually gives us.
Sure.
Or say that another way, we measure inflation based on the price of toothpaste and toasters.
Mm-hmm.
The CPI, Consumer Price Index.
Yeah.
But what government buys is not toothpaste and toasters. It's basically teachers and medical services and roads.
Important things
Yeah. That all go faster than the cost of toothpaste.
Yeah.
And so when you cap government to grow by only the price of toothpaste, you still lose out in real terms every year because of inflation.
Mm.
So outside of that, the criticism of how we measure inflation, keeping government the same size every year, it doesn't allow you to do anything new. Let's go back to housing. Let's say that other states have this awesome idea how to solve homelessness, or how to make an affordable housing trust fund, or to help first-time homeowners do whatever, buy a mortgage or whatever. That's like a non-starter in Colorado. We can't even do a new program because we don't even have the money to keep us even. We're kind of $1 billion last year before we even HR 1 passed, and we had to cut another $1 billion.
Right.
So there's no innovation. That's not even a starting point in Colorado.
So it's just creating like this massive wave of stagnation, at least on the legislative level. Like, we can't afford to do anything else.
That's it. And yeah.
I hear from young people, especially, I keep referring to cost of living, but specifically rent prices. I'm someone who just got priced out of Boulder when there is no, and this is a statewide issue. Obviously, we have a statewide ban on rent control, but even so far as like rental assistance programs from the state are not something that we can even entertain right now because of TABOR.
Not when we're cutting our own schools, and we're cutting our transportation funding, and we're cutting our Medicaid. It's like the three big thing. I mean, Medicaid schools are basically 2/3 of the state budget, and we're already cutting them. So how do you, as a legislator, say, "Oh, let's find $300 million somewhere else," and this, you don't have it.
So, time out. Let's talk about those two dissenting opinions. One being that why is it a bad thing that tax decision goes to the voter? We're the ones who are affected by tax decisions anyways. And the other being that TABOR refunds are really nice. First, let's get the easy one out of the way. TABOR refunds, they're not happening next year. And it may be unlikely that they happen the next year after that. Colorado, remember, is in a $2.5 billion deficit. That means that the surplus money that we collected from taxes does not exist, which means those days of getting the $750 TABOR refund are over. The other side of that is, why is it a bad thing that tax decisions go to the people every time? And I'll name two reasons. One, we live in a representative democracy, which means that when we vote to put state electeds into office, we are putting our trust behind them that they will represent the people, their constituents, as effectively as possible. Obviously, that is not always the case, and that's when those secondary organizing tactics come in. Go testify, call your Congress people, write letters to them, write LTEs, do negative accountability campaigns, do positive accountability campaigns. All of those are extra steps to make sure that your elected stays on track after you've elected them. When every tax decision comes down to a choice of the voter, and even further than that, TABOR dictates the language that we are allowed to use on different tax measures, it makes it so that absolutely no tax increase is attractive to the taxpayer, regardless of how many people it's going to help or how much it'll ease the quality of their life. When we live in a representative democracy, we need to be able to put trust in our electeds. And I know that that's not an easy thing to do, especially nowadays when our electeds seem to fail us at every turn. But again, that is when those secondary organizing tactics come in. That is when we show up to the legislative session to share our story and how bills will impact us. That accountability that comes after election won't go away. People are never going to just make the right decisions on their own. But we need to be able to put some trust in our electeds to make decisions that are not going to get bogged down in bureaucracy. When it takes us, anywhere between 1 and 5 years to pass a change to how Colorado taxes are done, that's 5 more years of additional deficit, 5 more years of additional cut funding for programs, schools, cities, the whole 9 yards. Time out. I want to consolidate the negatives of TABOR just so that we can really hammer home the point of why this is such a negative. The first one that Chris mentioned there is it caps growth as a state. We do not have the funding to be able to grow in infrastructure, in social programs, in really any kind of benefit that constituents of Colorado should be seeing, because TABOR caps the amount of money that our government is able to take in. And it is not even enough money to keep the government functioning as it currently is, which is dreary as hell. Similar to having a cap on the amount of growth that Colorado is able to see, that impacts infrastructure, that impacts things like roads, highways, education. There is no reason why in the 21st century, as one of the wealthiest states in the union, Colorado should have any need or reason to cut funding for schools. Already in a time where educators are so poorly paid and so ill-equipped to be able to do their jobs, why on earth is it a good idea to continue to cut funding? And that's exactly what our tax system in Colorado does. For as far as, obviously, because of the deficit this year, I believe it's been confirmed that there will be no TABOR refund next year.
Right. So it was that $1 billion hole that we lost because of HR 1 passing, that basically, if this is my fees and taxes and the cap, we were above the cap for several years, and we had to give this part of the money back. We gave $3.7 billion back in 2022. We gave $3.7 billion back in 2023. There's a huge amount of historically large TABOR rebates.
Yeah.
In situations when you're already in a TABOR rebate situation, it doesn't help you to raise more revenue, because if you do, the bar just gets higher and your TABOR rebates get higher.
Right.
So it doesn't benefit schools or the general fund to raise revenue in a TABOR rebate situation, because it just means more TABOR rebates out of the general fund.
So how do, say, TABOR is going to be the law of the land for the next 40 years. Say that's the hellscape we're living in. Is there a place where Colorado can, or is there a way that Colorado can undo the massive deficit that we're in to the point where people would start getting TABOR refunds back? Or what is that? Is there an idea of what that timeline looks like? How long it'll take us to dig ourselves out of this hole?
Yeah, so there's 2 camps, I think, and then let's improve our funding for our public services. There's one camp that would say, let's repeal TABOR and let state legislators fix the thing. Mm-hmm. There's another camp that says, let's work within TABOR, because TABOR allows you to go to voters and say, let's raise taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're going to see on the ballot in 2026. That was filed with that is what was filed with the Secretary of State's office recently, that you're part of.
Yeah.
Is a ballot issue. And then we're going to have to run around and annoy people when they come out of the grocery store to sign signatures.
Yep.
Because you've got to get 125,000 signatures and 2% in every Senate district across the state to get on the ballot through the Citizens Initiative process. That is working within the confines of TABOR. You're allowed to go to voters and ask permission to raise taxes.
Sure.
And then those taxes that are raised, they're no longer count as part of the bar. So it wouldn't screw up the TABOR rebates. It wouldn't be like new revenue you have to return.
Yeah.
It would be like exempted from the bar. So TABOR, like voter approved revenue is TABOR exempt. Let's say it that way.
Okay.
And so by going to a tax increase on graduated income tax, it still maintains future TABOR rebates in the future. That's the benefit at the back. To your point, everyone likes their TABOR rebates.
Yeah.
Right, not repealing TABOR or not repealing the TABOR rebate thing, you can still tell voters in the future they can see TABOR rebates if the government, revenue and fees grow faster than the cap.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the benefit of going to a group tax increase, asking voter permission.
So you mentioned their graduated tax rates. Right now, TABOR operates under something called a flat tax rate.
Actually, everyone pays 4.4.
4.4%, no matter what income you're making throughout the year in the state of Colorado.
And corporations as well.
And corporations as well. I forgot we also treat corporations as people. That's a whole other situation. So this ballot measure that CFI and New Era are a part of, what would that change about that flat tax rate?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics, and well, I just know the goal is to actually lower tax rates for the bottom.
Yeah.
So I think it goes from 4.4 to like 4.3 or 4.2 for like the first 100 or so thousand, and it's really not, the tax increase doesn't really kick in until you 500,000. So any tax filer that has more than $500,000 in taxable income, then they start paying the higher rates.
Okay, so I guess I hate to be that stereotypical philosophy dude, but let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Flat tax rates they are equal. It feels to some degree, or I've gotten comments from some folks that why is it unfair to tax everybody at the same rate? Wouldn't that make sense? Just to treat everybody the same under the tax code. So like why might it be harmful to the state of Colorado to tax everybody at a flat rate?
Yeah, it's a great question. Great point. That's only looking at the income tax. Think of the tax code as three legs of a stool. We have property tax, sales tax, and income tax.
Yeah.
Property and income, sales tax, particularly sales tax and fees, are very regressive. So that's the term where lower income folks pay a higher percentage of their income in this regressive sales tax. So yes, maybe you like the flat income tax because it treats everyone equally, but what most states do that use a graduated income tax is they basically balance out how regressive property and sales are with a progressive income tax. So you have to look at holistically at all taxes when you're talking about tax burden.
So I guess the driving point behind that is with the regressive taxes is that things like sales tax you mentioned affect lower income folks at a higher rate than higher income people. Could you elaborate a little bit on why that is? Because it's not like the ultra wealthy in Colorado aren't going to grocery stores, aren't going to Target every now and then. So why does that end up affecting folks in lower income brackets?
Yeah, okay, let's think about it. So I always say, what do I say? If someone makes 100 times more than me, they don't drive 100 times as far, so they're not spending 100 times more gas. They're not using 100 times more pillows. They're not buying 100 times more jeans. It changes how that.
That's a very good. I feel like I wish I had that in my arsenal when I was talking to him, because it ended up being like a 30-minute discussion.
Was the question, why is the sales tax regressive?
Why does it make sense that lower income folks end up paying more into the system with a flat tax rate?
So some people will say that even our flat income tax in Colorado, which is mandated by TABOR, we used to have a stepped or tiered graduate. Most states have higher rates on higher income earners, graduated rate. That's what we may be talking about later on the ballot issues that's coming down the pike next year. TABOR says we have that tax income flat.
Yeah.
So you pay 4.4%, Bo Nix pays 4.4%.
Right.
Everyone. Intuitively, it sounds really good, but then you don't realize that the other taxes or let's say it another way. Sales tax are very regressive. Property tax tend to be slightly regressive. Cigarette tax, very regressive. Gas tax, slightly regressive. Most states balance out how regressive those consumption taxes are by saying, let's capture more of our income for our schools and our roads and our bike paths from upper income earners through a graduated income tax.
That makes sense.
So basically, TABOR doesn't allow us to offset the regressive nature of all those other fees and taxes by collecting more of our revenue from a graduated income tax.
It's almost like a balance game, like where you're starting off with the assumption that there is inequality or wealth inequality in Colorado, and then you're taking the sales tax, like sales tax for example, because some folks might not know what you mean when you use regressive tax, but basically would that mean like actually.
Yeah, good question. Yeah. Regressive is maybe a word we don't throw around too much because I teach econ, but I don't. Regressive, if you hear regressive, think it disproportionately hurts the poor. And it's a blunt way of saying it, but as a percentage of your household income, if you're a low-income person, you might pay, because you buy everything that has sales tax, you might pay 9%. Mm-hmm. But whereas I'm wealthy, I save more of my money, I buy more services, I don't buy lawnmowers, I buy lawnmower services. Something like that. My consumption bundle is different. Maybe if I'm only paying 4% and you're paying 9%, even though I might be paying a lot more in dollars because I'm wealthy, sure, the dollar, but as a percentage of my income, it's lower than the percentage of your income. That's what we call regressive.
I see. So then you kind of have to play that balance game with the graduated income tax.
Yeah, and that's a direct way of making it progressive.
Yeah.
Grabbing more of things, paying for schools for upper income earners, by having rates that are, and most people don't even understand how those work.
Yeah.
So most people think you ever hear I was bumped up to a higher rate, or sorry, I made more this year, I was bumped up to a higher bracket.
Yeah.
That's true, but you still paid the other brackets along the way.
Right.
So our federal system is graduated. So even Bill Gates pays 15% on the first like 20,000 he earns, just like you pay 15% on the first 20,000, and then the next bracket's like 22%. So then everyone still pays 15% on the first 20.
Sure.
And then everyone pays 22% on the next 40 or whatever it is. It's not until you get into the highest bracket where Bill Gates is paying 37 or whatever it is
right.
percent. But he doesn't pay 30% on all of it.
It's just
he still goes up the ladder, sort of.
Extra money that is above that certain level. Yeah. So we just talked about something called regressive taxes and how those disproportionately affect lower income people, and how under TABOR, lower income people end up paying a lot more into the system because we are so dependent on regressive taxes. So let's take something like sales tax, which is a regressive tax, meaning it disproportionately affects lower income people. If you have two people, person A, person B, both going and spending $10,000 on groceries every year, but person A is making $30,000, person B is making $50,000, they both spend $10,000, and that sales tax comes out to about $500 per year. Person A making $30,000 pays a lot more proportionally in their income than person B. What a graduated income tax would do it would balance out those transactions.
You should check out my book. Can I plug my book?
Oh, absolutely.
Economics and Other Words. I got a goofy guide to learning economics. I've worked with a cartoonist for several years.
I like that.
I've been teaching microeconomics at 8 a.m. for like the last 10 years.
As someone who took microecon at an 8 a.m. slot, I can tell you that can be sometimes brutal on the brain.
Oh, you either have to be really engaging or like come with examples that students get, or otherwise you just people.
Yeah. Well, that concludes it, people. Congratulations for making it to the end of the video. I'm very proud of how that... Well, that concludes it, folks. Welcome to the end of the video. Congrats to those of you who made it. I hope you learned as much about TABOR as I did. Personally, a lot of that conversation initially felt like it was going over my head, but it sparked a whole little research rabbit hole that I went down. So I was excited to share this with y'all. We'll be releasing the next video in a much shorter time frame than the previous one. We're going to talk a little bit about individualism and how that ties into the community building and sharing our stories that we've been talking about on this channel. Go ahead and leave a comment if you want us to release the unedited version of the interview. Chris and I ended up talking for about an hour or so. Obviously, we couldn't fit that all in the video, but we covered a wide range of topics. So I'm hoping to do more interviews, and thanks again for tuning in, and I will catch you next time. Toodles.